The story begins 249 years ago in a land that knew peace and stability. On what seemed like an ordinary day, people went about their daily routines, browsing through markets, chatting in the streets, completely unaware of the catastrophe that was about to unfold. Without warning, a massive portal opened in the sky, marking the onset of a calamity. From it descended terrifying beings from another world, creatures that would soon be known as demons. With no hesitation, these demons launched a savage assault on humanity. Their declaration of war was clear, and their destruction swift and merciless. This marked the true beginning of the demon invasion. In response to the crisis, the Orthodox Alliance quickly assembled a force known as the Orthodox Sky Demon Extermination Corps, vowing to repel the invaders. However, just 3 days later, they clashed with the Demon Legion in the region of Ain and suffered a devastating defeat. Within a year, half the population of the Central Plains had been wiped out. In a desperate final effort, warriors from both Orthodox and non-Orthodox factions united, forming one last resistance force in Sichuan. The final battle raged on for over half a month, but despite their determination, 90% of the resistance was slaughtered, and the entire Central Plains fell. The few who survived were captured and dragged into the demon world as slaves. Among them was the protagonist of our tale. He spent 5 years in that nightmare realm, enduring captivity, torture, and horrific experiments. Born without the ability to harness internal energy, he was labeled a rare specimen and subjected to even crueler tests. Eventually, he was transformed into a living weapon. After undergoing brutal brainwashing, he was conscripted into the demon's subjugation army. For decades, he participated in countless invasions across other dimensions, leaving trails of blood and suffering behind. His life became a cycle of slaughter and warfare. After 75 years as a slave warrior, his relentless violence earned him recognition, and he rose to the rank of commander within the demon ranks. Another 120 years passed, and his name became feared and respected among demons. But then, he uncovered a powerful secret, one that would change everything. He spent the next 50 years obsessively researching how to reveal and act on this hidden truth. After an additional 65 years of planning, he finally launched a massive rebellion against the demons. A week into the uprising, we arrive at the present moment. The battlefield was stained with blood, and the cost of rebellion became clear. In a brutal showdown with the Demon King himself, the rebellion was decisively crushed. Demon King Tarrant personally confronted him, expressing his disappointment in someone who had once been a celebrated commander. Addressing him mockingly by his former name, Fun Green Tail, the king provoked him deeply. Fueled by rage and hatred for the name that symbolized his past torment, the protagonist lashed out violently. In a final act of defiance, he roared his true identity to the world. "My name is Sapayang." Demon King Tarrant spoke, his voice laced with genuine confusion about human nature. He admitted he had been observing Sapayang for a long time. Despite his lack of talent and weak abilities, Sapayang possessed an unyielding obsession with survival, a trait the king considered his only true strength. Tarrant questioned why, after all these years, Sapayang had chosen to act so recklessly. To this, Sapayang responded calmly but firmly. He had to fight the king, to face him directly, even just once. He explained that it was necessary to test himself, to know his own limits before the real battle to come. This fight was not about victory, but about understanding. The Demon King found the reasoning intriguing, yet still labeled it naive and foolish. He warned Sapayang that this would be the end. There would be no second chance. But Sapayang, bloodied and severely wounded, refused to yield. With unshakable determination, he shouted that he would not allow himself to be killed. Not here, not today. Then, in an instant, he unleashed a superhuman force, and a blinding light tore through the air. The Demon King's eyes widened. He recognized the phenomenon immediately. The return of time, a forbidden power once known only to Noron, the ancient master of evil. In that moment of realization, Tarrant murmured that now, everything made sense. All the pain, the torture, and the defeat Sapayang had endured for 120 years had been for this one purpose, this exact moment. Consumed by rage and defiance, Sapayang screamed in the Demon King's face, threatening him with a chilling promise. The next time they met, he would destroy them all, none would be left alive. The Demon King, however, only gave a sarcastic smile, seemingly unfazed. Yet for the first time, he acknowledged Sapayang with genuine respect, calling him the only human he had ever truly admired. Then, everything vanished in a massive explosion. In the next scene, time rewinds, 10 full years before the demon invasion. The story returns to the Central Plains, to the peaceful grounds of the Dragon Spring Martial Arts Academy of the Orthodox Alliance. Workers talked among themselves about a bizarre incident. A bolt of lightning had struck the academy's training ground with enough force to destroy the roof. One of them sighed in relief, noting that the only one injured was that failure. That failure, it turned out, was Sapayang, an internal energyless martial arts instructor. Although his injuries were minor, another man coldly remarked that he wished the lightning had done more damage, as this was the day of Sapayang's public execution. Shortly after, the execution ceremony began, but not in the form of a punishment. Instead, it took the shape of a formal duel. An official stepped forward and announced the beginning of the challenge for the position of assistant spear instructor at Dragon Spring Academy. The duel would take place between the current assistant instructor, Sapayang, and his challenger, Mang Sonic, famously known as the Invincible Divine Spear. This duel would determine whether Sapayang was worthy of keeping his position. Mang Sonic stood with a confident smile, waiting for the duel to begin. He mocked Sapayang, saying he had expected him to dodge the confrontation using the lightning strike as an excuse. Yet Sapayang appeared calm and unwavering, showing no fear despite his injuries. His composure unsettled Mang Sonic. With a formal announcement, the duel began. Both men were reminded to fight with honor as true warriors. To Mang Sonic's surprise, Sapayang held his own far better than expected. Mang mocked him again, suggesting he may have faked the lightning incident to gain sympathy or avoid the match. Still, he admitted Sapayang had courage, and out of respect, he decided to end the fight swiftly. Sundok suggested that Sapayang should surrender in the distant future, completely underestimating him. Sapayang began to remember the past and how he suffered from everyone's contempt because he was an instructor at a martial arts academy without the ability to use internal energy. He remembered the humiliating defeat he had previously suffered in a public duel. How he lost his position as an instructor and was forced to do demeaning and lowly jobs which made him live through extremely harsh days. All of this made Sapagong prepare for this specific moment which he had been eagerly awaiting. Mang Sun Diok felt annoyed by Sapagong's words, as he did not understand them, and he asked angrily about the nonsense he was spouting, while Sapagong smiled defiantly, and declared that he had waited a long time for this moment to face him. Mangek's anger grew because of the arrogance Sapayang displayed, and he said that he had intended to allow him some pride out of respect for being an instructor. Mang Diok began to use the bull demon spear art with great force as he angrily declared that it was time to silence the arrogant Sapayang forever. His eyes appeared to be glowing with anger as he launched a massive attack using the first form Wild Bull's charge. Sundok was surprised when he felt no impact from his attack on his spear at all, which increased his confusion. Sapagong mockingly replied that his attack looked good, but it needed to hit its target first to have any meaning. Sundok tried to attack Sapagong again with great force and intense anger, but the latter managed to dodge it with surprising ease. Mang Diok was stunned, wondering to himself how Saigong managed to dodge his attack so simply, even though he had heard he was extremely weak. Mangek refused to believe what had happened and considered it to be just a matter of luck on Sapyang's part. Sundiok launched another more ferocious attack than before, leaping into the air with force while screaming in anger. At the peak of his rage, he announced his use of the fourth form of the bull demon spear, and he unleashed his final attack with immense power as he screamed at the top of his lungs, wishing death upon Sapayang. As the duel intensified, Sapayang appeared extremely focused and calm. As he prepared to block his opponent Ming Sunik's attack, he began to execute graceful and swift movements with his spear, forming a solid defensive barrier. After that, he took a combat stance with great confidence, ready for the confrontation. Mangek laughed with loud sarcasm, asserting the impossibility of these humble spear techniques withstanding his powerful attack. At that moment, Saigong surprised everyone by using a very strange and amazing technique he called Fireball, which he created with his hand and launched toward his opponent. Shock appeared on Sundok's face. He couldn't comprehend what Sapong said and couldn't believe what he was seeing. The fireball exploded with immense force, knocking Mang Sundok down amidst everyone's astonishment. The spectators looked on in a state of shock and horror at what they had just seen. Sundok began to roll on the ground, trying to extinguish the fire that had ignited on his body, screaming in terror. The duel was immediately declared over after Seg's superiority was proven in a decisive and shocking way for all. He was officially declared the winner of the duel and the assistant instructor. Sapiang's memory returned to the past where he was captured alive by the demons. He remembered how he was dragged to the demon world and how he struggled to survive there for long centuries. During that time, he realized something very important, that using combat techniques like Hit-Yong and Heil magic is not so different from traditional martial arts. In the present, his opponent's body lay on the ground burned and in severe pain. With light sarcasm, Sapang waved for the staff to remove his opponent from the arena, commenting on the quality of the duel. The attendees, students, and spectators began to discuss what happened, wondering if the technique Saigong used was truly a martial art. The officials also expressed their displeasure and extreme confusion, wondering how Sapang could do such a thing, considering what happened to be nonsense and illogical. Despite everyone's astonishment and some's anger, an official approached Saigong to congratulate him on his victory. But he expressed his confusion and asked him how he used internal energy despite their knowledge of his inability to do so. Sapang replied with a calm smile that what happened was just a stroke of luck. Sapang explained the matter sarcastically, saying that a few days ago, he found a strange herb while wandering, and after eating it, he suddenly found himself able to use enormous amounts of internal energy. This sarcastic explanation led to intense displeasure from the officials, who considered his words dismissive and disrespectful. As the anger and resentment from the officials continued, Sape said coldly that it was their right to believe his words or reject them, and he wondered if it really mattered. Then he asserted that he did not cheat in the duel. It was a competition for the position of assistant spear instructor, and there were no rules preventing him from using techniques other than the spear. Sapang expressed his surprise at being subjected to this investigation and doubt despite his fair and clear victory in the duel. At that point, an angry official tried to respond to him, but another official intervened, trying to de-escalate the situation, telling his angry colleague that he should calm down. In the end, the officials calmly and officially acknowledged Sapyeong's victory in this duel, confirming their recognition of the battle's result despite their astonishment at what had happened. After the duel ended and Sapagong was declared the winner, an official was about to speak to give the next instructions. But Sapagong quickly interrupted him, explaining to everyone that as long as all the officials were present, he had an important request. He stuck his spear into the ground and then formally requested to be allowed to take a test for promotion from assistant instructor to official instructor. After that, Sepyeong was seen walking inside the academy amidst the astonishment of the students and other assistants, who began to whisper about him with curiosity, pointing him out as the person who had won the duel. Sapyeong turned towards the students who were talking about him with a confident look without showing any annoyance. A general view of the Dragon Spring Academy appeared, which is one of the martial arts training institutions established by the Orthodox Alliance with the aim of training fighters who would later become main pillars of the alliance. The academy clarifies that it accepts students from well-known families and sects, and the training is handled by professional instructors who are divided into assistants and official instructors. The assistant's task is mainly to help the official instructors in teaching the young students. Sapyeong entered a room in the academy to face a person who was waiting for him and asked him with clear interest what had happened to him and how he was suddenly able to use internal energy. It turned out that this person was Jean Bayek, the head of the Body Recovery Pavilion at the academy, who was a doctor responsible for treating the sick, not an instructor. Sapyeong repeated what he had said before, that it was just a stroke of luck, which greatly angered Jin Baek, who reminded him that he had treated him for a long time and made tremendous efforts to try to fix his problem with internal energy, and he considered this explanation an insult to him. Jin Baek felt bitterness and sorrow and wondered sadly about the point of all his efforts if it was that simple. Jin Baek appeared completely devastated and expressed his deep shame in facing Sapayang, apologizing profoundly for what happened, explaining that he was well aware of how Sapayang had suffered from hatred because of that problem of his. At this moment, it was clear that Saigong was moved by Jin Baek's words, admitting to himself that this man had never changed and was like a true father to him. His memory went back 542 years to when Jin Baek had saved him as a child from a fire started by a bandit attack. And he also remembered that Jin Baek himself had died on that day while saving other people. But Sapayang decided that this time would be different, and he firmly gripped Jin Baek's hand, assuring him that he would ensure he stayed alive and asked him not to blame himself or worry about him. Jin Baek seemed surprised by these words. But Sapayang reassured him and asked him to just trust him, confirming that he would solve all the problems from now on. After that, Sapayang appeared in his room in the evening, looking at the sky through the window, contemplating. Sapayang summoned a magical power in his hand, and a bright blue light appeared. He then clarified to himself that when he returned to the past, he lost more than 90% of his former magical energy, and that the most he could currently do is use magic from the fourth circle only. Sapayang expressed his disappointment. It had taken him centuries to reach the eighth circle of magic, but he checked his feelings and affirmed that he should be grateful that he still possessed his current magical energy. With determined eyes and intense resolve, he assured himself that he had indeed returned from that hell he had previously lived in. He recalled memories of his return from a dark timeline, describing that world as a true hell. Sapayang explained that history has been turned back and the demons of the Jangmaram world have not yet begun their invasion. But he firmly asserted that the word "yet" is the key. He pointed out that 10 years from now, the invasion will begin again and Jangmurim will collapse once more. But this time, Sapayang affirmed that things would be completely different because he retains memories amounting to 300 years of experience and knowledge. He has precise information about the type of magic the demon army uses, as well as the tools and weapons they prepared for the invasion. And most importantly of all, he knows exactly how to eliminate the demon king himself. Meanwhile, the pavilion head, Jin Baek, knocked on Saigong's door and asked if he was in the room. Sapayang confirmed he was there and asked what he wanted. Jin Baek told him that the academy's vice director, Cheon Simyong, was looking for him. Sapayang was surprised that the vice director sent this message through Jin Baek. But Jin Baek asserted that he didn't care much about that, and what concerned him more was his worry for Sapayang himself. Jin Baek predicted that Cheon Simyong's request would be related to the promotion test Sapayang had asked for, and he advised him to be careful. He added that the test would certainly be difficult, especially since Ming Sun Diok, who lost to Sapayang, was the person Cheon Simyong had recommended, and it was clear he held a great grudge against him. After that, Jin Baek wondered about Seg's sudden desire to become an official instructor, to which Seg replied with a confident smile that it was the first step towards reforming this academy. Sapayang recalled a memory from the past where the Dragon Spring Academy was once famous and considered one of the top 3 orthodox martial arts mice. But 2 years ago, the academy's director, who was among the top 10 martial arts masters, suddenly vanished without a trace. The academy searched for him for 2 full years to no avail, and it was extremely difficult to find a replacement of the same caliber, which led to a significant decline in the academy's reputation. Sapayang headed towards the meeting room and opened its door, preparing to face the vice director. Cheon Simyong, the vice director and head of sword technique instruction, began the meeting by asking if Saigong was serious about his request for promotion. Inwardly, Sapayang described Cheon Simyong as the main reason for the deterioration and fall of the Dragon Spring Academy. Despite that, he smiled and replied with apparent respect, confirming that he was, of course, completely serious in his request, addressing him by the title vice director. Sapayang opened the door to the room, preparing for the meeting that awaited him. He entered the room where the academy's vice director, Cheon Simyong, was waiting for him along with a senior instructor. Cheon began the conversation by confirming the promotion request that Saigong had submitted. Cheon Simyong asked him with extreme seriousness if he was truly serious about the promotion request he had submitted. Bigang stared at the vice director with a deep and determined gaze. His memory suddenly flashed back to the day of the demon invasion when the academy was engulfed in flames. In that moment, he remembered his own miserable state amidst the destruction and chaos. Bigang remembered how huge rifts appeared everywhere from which monsters no one had ever seen before emerged. And these monsters began to kill people, mercilessly. That was the moment the catastrophic invasion, which was named the Demon Race, began. He also remembered the young students from the Dragon Spring Academy and how they were brutally killed by those terrifying monsters. On that shocking day, he remembered one of the students, calling out to an instructor for help, but the instructors had fled, leaving them behind. So, Bigang recalled how Vice Director Chan Simyong was the first to flee the invasion site. And if he hadn't fled at the beginning, the academy might have avoided that terrifying fate. The screams of the students who were sacrificed that day echoed in his mind as he stood before the two men in the room. Then, Bigang affirmed to himself that all those events had not happened yet, as he had now returned to the past. Nevertheless, he assured himself that he would never forget Chan Simyong's hypocritical and disgusting face. Then he smiled a sarcastic smile and asked him with apparent politeness what he wanted from him. Chan Simyong calmly told him that he would inform him of the test details, and that the required test for his promotion to official instructor would be to raid the demonic knight stronghold. Bigang seemed a little surprised and asked for clarification if the vice director meant the group of bandits on the mountain behind the academy. And Kyan confirmed that he indeed meant them and that the test was to kill them. It was clarified that the demonic knight stronghold was the headquarters of a group of bandits who had stationed themselves on the old sacred mountain near the academy, and this group had caused significant damage to the local population. Bigang took the paper bearing the test details signed by Vice Director Chan Simyong, read it carefully and said calmly, "All right." Then Bigang wondered what this test had to do with his job as a martial arts instructor. To which Chan Simyong replied with visible anger that this test was considered a fundamental requirement for any official instructor. Then the other senior instructor Bong Ryo Hyong affirmed that the official instructors are the core strength of the academy. The senior instructors of the academy were introduced, such as Chayan Simyong and Jong Reahong, as well as Unbuk and Sang Pilg, explaining their great skills and their recognition by the Orthodox Alliance as masters of martial arts. Byong Ryo Hyong proudly asserted that they had all accomplished great deeds, such as eliminating leaders of evil martial arts and bandits. At that point, Saigong interrupted them indifferently and asked coldly, "How much time do I have?" Vice Director Cheon Simyong answered with complete clarity that he had exactly 2 weeks, and if he was late by even 1 day, he would lose his chance for promotion forever. Sapayang smiled confidently and repeated calmly with a sarcastic smile on his face, 2 weeks. As he was leaving the room in front of Vice Director Chayon Simyong, Sapayang announced that he would return in just 3 days, thereby ignoring the 2 deadline the Vice Director had set for him. This act angered the senior instructor, Bong Ryo Hyong, who lost his composure and called Saigong an arrogant little brat. While the Vice Director seemed to be lost in silent thought, Instructor Bong expressed his anger again and asked the Vice Director emotionally if he really intended to promote that arrogant person. But Cheon Simyong reassured him with a malicious smile that there was no need to worry, and sarcastically assured him that the poor assistant Instructor Sapayang would never return. Meanwhile, Sapayang left the place very quickly using the haste spell. While angrily affirming to himself that Cheon Simyong was just a hypocrite and that he was fully aware of what he was planning, Sapayang began to think about the demonic knight stronghold and recall his information about it, noting that it had appeared around the same time the Green River Forest Alliance began to gain fame and that the available information about it was very scarce. At the same time, the other instructor was extremely shocked by the information the Vice Director was revealing about the stronghold's leader, asking in astonishment if he was serious in what he was saying. The Vice Director, Chayon Simyong, confirmed with a sarcastic tone that the leader of the demonic knight stronghold was A.K. Gojang, who is an extremely dangerous and ferocious martial master, and that he is known as the former leader of an evil sect called the Sky-Shattering Sect. He explained that although everyone thought he had died at the hands of traitors years ago, he survived, tracked down all who betrayed him and killed them brutally, and became hunted by numerous sects because of his bloody revenge and had been hiding in this area recently. The other senior instructor expressed his astonishment at the secret information the vice director knew and asked him with surprise how he had obtained these details. But the vice director just laughed and told him that it wasn't important. Now, Cheon Simyong continued, saying that although Saping had shown surprising strength in the previous duel, it was only possible because he had hidden his true abilities. But he added that this mission was a real test and not just a duel. And therefore, he was completely confident that Saping would not return from it alive. Meanwhile, Saping was moving very quickly towards his target. And he realized that if Akoji was as strong as he remembered, the fourth circle magic he currently possessed would not be enough to defeat him. But Saigong suddenly realized that the solution was simple, and he reached the intended location with extreme speed where he began to descend using the levitation spell. As soon as Seg reached the entrance of the target location, he decided that he would increase his magical energy and elevate his magic level to a higher circle. Saping remembered that his original magical knowledge and experience were already equivalent to the 8th circle level, and he used the search spell to explore the place thoroughly. Saping noticed that from the outside the place looked like an ordinary cliff. But upon touching it, he discovered that there was a hidden magical barrier made of magical energy. Mana. Saping smiled confidently and assured himself that he had reached the right place and that no one would have imagined the existence of such hidden places in the Central Plains. Saping advanced inside the hidden place behind the magical energy mana barriers and immediately noticed the presence of a rare special grade mana stone. He explained to himself that this stone is the key to the demon's power which they rely on to restore their energy when invading different dimensions. Saping remembered the weakness of the interdimensional travel technique used by the demons where the travel speed of living things and inanimate objects differs greatly. A problem the demons have not yet been able to solve. The solution the demons resorted to was to plant the equipment they would need in the future in the dimensions they planned to invade, including these rare mana stones. Saping noted that this stone was worthless to the humans of the Central Plains because they are unable to use mana, at least for now. But as soon as he touched the stone, Saping unleashed an immense and powerful energy. The place shook and the ground cracked from the powerful explosion of energy that Saping released. And then, on the evening of that day, there was a group of men who approached quickly to check the source of the sound. These men appeared to be followers of the demonic knight stronghold. And among them was their leader A.K. Gojim. One of his followers cautiously asked if there was anything unusual. But A.K. Gom became angry, accused him of questioning his senses, and told him to be quiet and search thoroughly, asserting that he had felt a powerful energy explosion in the area. While they were searching, they were surprised by the sound of clapping from above. And it turned out that Saping was sitting relaxedly on a high rock, mocking them, saying he was sure that Akog was a top-level martial master. Akoji grew angry and asked him with a sharp tone who he was, to which Saigon replied with a provocative smile that he was an instructor at the Dragon Spring Academy. The followers began to wonder with surprise and concern why an instructor from the Dragon Spring Academy was here in their stronghold. But Akoji angrily ordered them to be quiet. Akoji asked Saping if he was the one who caused the previous energy explosion. To which Saping replied with a confident and provocative smile, "What if I was?" At this moment, without hesitation, Akajam launched a sudden and violent attack on Saping, telling him that he would kill him and that this was the reason he came to this place in the first place. Akeo was very shocked when he heard Saping's voice, mocking him and asking if that was really what he was going to do. The events began with a powerful attack from Akeong, who rushed with great force towards Seg, trying to eliminate him with a decisive blow. But Saigang easily countered his attack using a powerful spell in the form of a blade of magical energy called Mana Blade, which injured Akoji's followers and astonished him. So, Page continued his attack with clear sarcasm and disdain using the spell Trice and told Akoji in a clear tone of challenge that he came here specifically to kill him. The conflict between them intensified into a violent clash in which they exchanged extremely powerful blows. With a provocative smile, Saping gave Akogi a sarcastic piece of advice, saying it would be better for him to avenge his slain followers, which greatly angered Akoji. Akeum shouted in astonishment and intense anger, questioning Sapayagong's true identity. The two sides exchanged violent and successive blows, which continued for a very long time without either of them being able to gain control of the situation. During the fight, Sapagong once again confirmed his identity as an instructor from the Dragon's Spring Academy with a confident smile as he skillfully parried all of his opponent's blows. Akayam was stunned and shocked as he couldn't believe that there was someone capable of countering him so easily, and he realized that Sapagong was not taking him seriously at all. In a moment of intense anger, Akagam let out a powerful scream and a fierce attack, in a final attempt to overcome his opponent, but Sapagong easily dodged the attack using his high speed and superior combat skills. Akagom decided to resort to using his strongest secret techniques, the sky-shattering divine domination arts, and activated the core release technique, raising his power level to a frightening extent. Akium was furious that his opponent had pushed him to use this powerful technique, screaming at Seg that he would deeply regret it. At the peak of his rage, Akoji revealed his painful past and his suffering after being betrayed, and how he gathered all this negative energy to direct it towards revenge. But he was surprised by Sapong's coldness and contempt, who paid no attention to this and responded mockingly saying, "Who asked?" He told him he didn't care at all about any information about an evil person. In a shocking moment, Sapiang cast a very powerful spell called Freeze Wave, which completely froze Akium in his place, leaving him stunned. Before Akogi could realize what was happening, Saigong cast another powerful spell called Astral Chain, which completely bound his opponent. Akogi tried hard to break free from these restraints, but his attempts were completely futile. Sapayang explained confidently that this spell was originally designed to deal with people who use internal energy, thus completely paralyzing his movement. Akayam wondered with intense anger how Sapayang could be capable of using such magic, accusing him of possibly being from the demon sect. But Sepe calmly and contemptuously replied that it was mana and not magic, and belittled him by saying he didn't expect much from a mere bandit. Ake Goyam was filled with rage and fury at Sepang's words and screamed at him that he was cursed. While he was bound in feeling his end approaching, Akoji expressed his regret and sorrow that his death would be in a place like this, to which Sapayang replied calmly and coldly, asking him if he had any regrets. Akagi began to scream from intense pain and anger, declaring that he had not yet taken revenge on those who betrayed him, the people who manipulated his followers when he was the leader of the sky-shattering sect. He recalled his bitter suffering, asserting that the reason he hid in these mountains and joined the demonic knight stronghold was all for the sake of revenge only. Akeo tried to continue narrating his motives, but he was interrupted by the sound of sarcastic applause from Sapayang, who mockingly praised Akoji's insistence on revenge and his refusal to give up despite the difficulties, advising him with ridicule that revenge should be slow, thorough, and without despair. Akoji felt insulted and thought Sapong was mocking him, accusing him of being just a young man who had lived a comfortable life without any real knowledge of suffering. At this point, the expression on Sapagang's face changed frighteningly, and he told him in a grim voice that he had not lived a comfortable life as he thought. Akoji felt terror from the frightening look in Sape's eyes and realized that there was something very wrong with his opponent. At that moment, Sapayang decided to make Aki experience his suffering for a little while and test the same hell and suffering that he himself had endured for 200 years. Suddenly, Akagam found himself in a dark and strange place, not knowing where he was, and he began to feel extreme confusion and fear and wondered about this strange place. Then terrifying visions of the frightening future that awaited in 10 years appeared before him, and he witnessed hordes of terrifying demons invading and destroying everything in their path with horrific scenes of death and torment. Akogi began to scream in extreme terror, and he couldn't bear these terrifying visions that had suddenly invaded his mind. Then Sapayang brought him back to reality and sarcastically asked him how his experience was, calmly explaining to him that what he had just seen is the future that will happen in 10 years. Akoji collapsed on the ground from terror and psychological pain and began to beg Sapayang with extreme weakness to kill him and end his life because he could no longer bear what he had seen. Sapagang replied calmly, explaining that he understood his request very well, then prepared to carry out his death sentence, asserting that although the matter is difficult, there is someone who must do it. Meanwhile, elsewhere at the Dragon Spring Academy, Vice Director Chan Simyong felt shock and disbelief as he stared at AK Gojim's massive weapon in front of him. Realizing that Saigong had actually succeeded in the difficult mission he had assigned him, Sapiang threw Akyong's head in front of Vice Director Cheon Simyong, sarcastically explaining that he didn't expect them to believe him if he only brought the sword, which is why he brought Akong's head as additional proof. Then, Sape smiled with sarcasm and confidence and suggested they begin discussing his new duties after his promotion to the position of first instructor. The next morning at the Dragon Spring Academy, the instructor's reactions to the news of Saigong's success were quite dramatic. The senior instructor of the fist technique, Yuan Jin, shouted his disbelief and anger at this news. Instructor Yuan Jin continued to express his extreme astonishment and displeasure, describing Sapiang as the academy's former disgrace and questioning how he suddenly became a first instructor. On the other hand, the senior instructor of the archery technique, Ion Jack, questioned whether Sapiang had actually raided the demonic knight stronghold alone. The senior instructor of the sword technique, Dong Bo Hyong, answered them, confirming that he himself went to the old sacred mountain to verify the matter. Dong Bo Hyong explained that he found the bodies of the bandits and specifically Akyong's body in the exact location Saigong had told them about. Daeong Bo Yong continued speaking with great hesitation and confusion, stating that he didn't know how it had happened. He added that, with the exception of Akyong, the necks of all the followers had been severed with a single strike, which raised everyone's suspicion and astonishment. At that point, a heated debate began among the instructors where they objected to what they saw of Sapiang's skills, especially since he was known as a spear instructor, not a sword instructor. But Vice Director Cheon Simyong intervened firmly and stopped the argument, asking them what they were doing. The instructors immediately apologized to the Vice Director, while Cheon Simyong sat thinking silently about the matter. Meanwhile, Vice Director Cheon Simyong was thinking deeply, telling himself that it was completely illogical for Sapiang to be able to kill Akogi and his followers by himself. He remembered that he himself had met Akyong and realized his great strength, which is why he saw it as impossible for him to be killed easily by Sapiang. Cheon Simyong wondered if Jinbeek, the doctor at the academy, had helped Sapiang in his mission, but he quickly dismissed the idea because Jinbeek did not have sufficient skills. Cheon Simyong decided that he had to investigate the matter further, so he asked instructor Jung Bohong to contact the Ghost Shadow Palace. It was explained that the Ghost Shadow Palace is one of the largest assassination organizations in the Murim world, and they are known for carrying out any mission for money. Vice Director Chan asked instructor Dung to submit a request to the Ghost Shadow Palace to find out all information related to Sapiang, including what he does daily, which surprised the other instructors. The senior instructor, Yuan Jin, received a list from the vice director, and when he asked about it, the vice director reassured him, saying that he had an idea about the matter. Instructor Yuan Jin read the paper the vice director had given him and wondered in confusion about its contents. The vice director explained to him that it was a list of the students Sa Peong would be responsible for after his promotion. Instructor Yuan Jin was extremely surprised by what he read on the list, and his eyes widened in astonishment when he understood the vice director's intention. Instructor Yuan Jin expressed his great admiration for the vice director's clever idea, and Cheon Simyong confirmed that he had used his position well. Instructor Yuan Jin laughed, saying that Seg might leave his job even before the Ghost Shadow Palace gets any information about him, and the vice director agreed with a laugh, saying that this was possible because he was inexperienced. One of the instructors asked instructor Dong if he had given the same list to Sapiang, and Dong replied that he had indeed done so. The other instructor asked about Saigong's reaction, and Dong replied that he merely gave a faint smile and said he understood everything. Meanwhile, as Saigong was leaving the place, he thought to himself sarcastically and described these old instructors as fools because they did exactly what he had expected them to do. Sapiag continued his train of thought, confirming that he had returned to this specific time and place for an important reason. And as he walked, he deeply remembered the power he had received from Nazaron and his ability to return in time, and began to ask himself repeatedly, "What must I do to prepare for the demon invasion?" He clearly realized that he could not face the demon army that had conquered many dimensions by himself. There are limits to what a single person can do. Sapigang clearly realized that there were many things he could do to counter the demon invasion, but he concluded that the best option was to form a strong army to confront them. And as he thought, Saigong ruled out the idea of his army being composed of weaklings like those who had died before he traveled back in time. Instead, he wanted a powerful army proficient in all types of magic and martial arts. Bigang looked at the students who had been classified as troublemakers among the first-year disciples and decided to focus on them first. He noticed that some of these students truly possessed great talents, but their difficult temperaments and personalities were hindering their progress. Among these disciples were some who had no apparent talent or were neglected by the teachers because they did not belong to prestigious families. Bigang believed that the senior instructors at the academy had deliberately chosen these students thinking he would not be able to handle them. But they never imagined the truth about these students. He recalled two heroes who had emerged prominently during the period of the demonic invasion. One was a master of the sword and the leader of the Heavenly Sword Alliance who had led the murim's resistance against the demons. The other hero he remembered was a masterful archer in martial arts who led a specialized squad for assassinations and infiltration and had single-handedly killed the largest number of demons. Bigang smiled as he looked at the disciples standing before him, confident that these two legendary heroes he remembered from the future were currently right before his eyes. Elsewhere in the academy, the student Tanny Jiang was being violently beaten by Gok Boy during combat training. Tan Lu Jiang fell to the ground screaming in pain from the powerful blow he received from Gok. Then Gok said in a sharp tone that the external arts training was not over yet and ordered Tanny Jiang to stand up to continue the training. But Tanny Jiang, the eldest student from the Onir sword family, begged Gok Boy with difficulty to stop hitting him. Gok Boy became angry at Tan's request and told him that others might think he was bullying him if he kept complaining like this. Gok Boy continued to provoke Tanny Jiang, saying he should be grateful that he was teaching him his special martial arts technique. But Tanny Jiang replied weakly that the fighting style he learned from his family was the only one he was good at. Gok Boy mocked Tan severely when he heard the name of the one-star sword family and ridiculed the value of their techniques. He continued to humiliate Tan, pointing out that those weak martial arts would never enable him to defend himself and asked if he wanted to continue learning them. Tan Lu Jiang felt anger and frustration from Gok Boy's words and clenched his fist tightly trying to suppress his anger. But a disciple suddenly intervened and told Gok Boy to open his fist and stopped provoking Tan or else they would have to have a new duel. Gok Boy felt provoked by the student's challenge, but he quickly unclenched his fist and walked away, realizing he couldn't face him right now. Then Yun Wook-young, the student from the devastating sword family, intervened and ordered Gok Boy to stop causing trouble, especially with the exams approaching. Gao backed down from the situation, saying he understood, but he gave a final warning to Tanny Jiang to consider himself lucky this time. Tanny Jiang thanked his classmate who intervened to save him from this difficult situation, but he looked confused and sad. Yun Wook-young turned towards him without saying anything, and he seemed to be thinking deeply about what had happened. Tanny Jiang sat alone and silent after that painful confrontation, showing signs of frustration and despair. At this moment, someone came into the room and called for the three students, Yun Wook-young, Gok Boy, and Tanny Jiang. Gao answered, wondering about the reason for the sudden summons, and the messenger told them that Vice Director Chan Sim-yong had informed him of a new decision. The messenger announced that the three of them were no longer part of the Camellia class, but would be transferred to a newly created class, which greatly surprised and astonished Gok Boy. And elsewhere, Sipyong stood facing the new group of students who had been specially chosen for him, who were looking at him with anticipation and caution, while he appeared confident and ready to begin his new duties. Sapiag greeted the disciples with a calm smile, announcing himself as their official instructor starting from this day. Some disciples were surprised by what was happening, and Yun Wook-young seemed slightly annoyed as he wondered what was going on, while another student showed signs of astonishment. Suddenly, the disciple Gok Boy shouted in extreme anger from afar, demanding a stop to what he described as nonsense. Gok Boy approached Sapyang, angrily expressing his displeasure at his sudden transfer to a new class with an instructor who was in his view weak in abilities. Gok Boy continued his objection, shouting that he would not listen to orders from someone who couldn't even use internal energy until recently. Sapiag calmly looked at Gok Boy and told him that his way of speaking to his supervising instructor was completely disrespectful. Gok Boy continued to curse at Sapiang with anger and contempt, pointing out that he didn't know how Sapyeong got the position of first instructor. He asserted that he would learn nothing from an instructor who had only recently been able to use internal energy, which increased the tension. In a sudden moment, Saigong used the blink spell, appearing directly in front of Gok Boy with immense speed, ready to take disciplinary action. Gao was shocked and confused by what happened. Not comprehending how Sapyeong managed to get so close to him so quickly, Gok Boy let out a scream of terror as he faced the instructor who had suddenly and unexpectedly appeared before him. Then Sapyeong calmly said that the Academy's regulations Article 3 Clause 5 allow him to punish a student who shows misconduct for the purpose of guiding and instructing them. Gok became enraged and clenched his fist, preparing to attack. He then launched his attack using the powerful and violent mountains-shattering Dragon Tiger Fist technique. Sapyeong easily avoided the attack, expressing his displeasure with Gok's disrespectful language and violent behavior towards his instructor. He then calmly added that using internal arts in class without permission is another violation of the rules. Gok tried to attack again, but Saigon quickly interrupted him, saying that the worst thing he did was the successive bad actions. Sapyeong delivered a swift, powerful punch towards Gok Boy, causing the latter to feel great shock and clear pain. Gao screamed loudly from the intense pain and began to feel weak in front of the instructor he had previously thought was weak. Sapyeong continued to talk about the weakness of Gao's combat skills, noting that he was not at the level he had expected. Sapyeong began a rapid and successive series of blows that hit Gok hard. Showing clear superiority, he delivered a final knockout blow to Gok Boy, causing him to fall to the ground in a humiliating manner. Gok fell to the ground in pain and unable to resist, with a look of anger and annoyance on his face. Sapyeong ordered him to stand up, asserting that his guidance and instruction were not over yet. Tonli Jiang watched the scene in great shock and amazement, not believing what he was seeing of Saigong's superiority over Gao. He remembered the strength of his classmate Gok Boy, who was known as one of the strongest new disciples in external arts training, and felt extremely confused by his swift defeat at the hands of Sapyeong. Gok Boy struggled to stand up again, cursing at Sapyeong with clear anger. But Sapyeong countered his new attack with complete ease and delivered another knockout blow that sent him to the ground a second time. The other disciples watched the scene in great shock and with clear concern on their faces. Sapyeong advanced towards the fallen Gok Boy and expressed his displeasure at the poor state the class had reached on the very first lesson. Directing his stern gaze towards the defeated disciple, Sapyeong calmly expressed his regret for what was happening, saying that an instructor's role is to stop their students' tears and teach them correctly, as he prepared to punish Gok Boy. Gok Boy appeared to be in a state of terror and shock, raising his hands in an attempt to defend himself against Sapyeong's impending attack. Sapyeong moved very quickly towards Gok Boy, while the other disciples seemed to watch the scene with great astonishment and concern. Meanwhile, Yoon Wook-young intervened, expressing his opinion that Seppe's actions towards the student were excessive, addressing Sapyeong with apparent respect. Sapyeong turned towards Yoon Wook-young with a calm smile, commenting that he had finally made a move, as if he had been waiting for his intervention from the beginning. At this moment, Sapyeong remembered that in the future, Yoon Wook-young would be the leader of the Heavenly Sword Alliance, which reflects the student's future importance and great strength. Seppeong remembered Yoon Wook-young from the first-year Camellia class as the second son of the devastating Sword Clan, which is one of the most famous and powerful clans in the Central Plains. From a young age, Yoon Wook-young was known within his clan for his exceptional genius in martial arts. Even among the new students at Dragon Spring Academy, he stood out for his superior skills. Yoon Wook-young's talent far surpassed the level of Dragon Spring Academy. At the age of 20, he managed to become a high-class martial master and was ranked among the top 10 martial masters in the Orthodox Alliance. Yoon Wook-young was supposed to live a bright life full of success, becoming one of the most prominent and respected martial masters in the Central Plains. But all those dreams and ambitions vanished with the appearance of the demons as the tragedy that completely changed the course of his life began. From the beginning of the demon invasion, Yoon Wook-young participated in more battles than anyone else and proved his valor and strength on the field. But Yoon's clan quickly became a primary target of intense demon attacks, leading to its complete annihilation, and all its members were killed except for Yoon Wook-young himself. Despite this catastrophe, Yun Wuqiang did not fall into despair or grief like others, but continued to resist and challenge. Yun Wuqiang traveled across the Central Plains fighting countless battles with the demons and gathered the survivors to form a united front of orthodox and non-orthodox sections. Even in desperate circumstances, Yun Wukong led the remaining martial artists in a final, desperate resistance against the demons. Sapong still clearly remembered Yun Wuqiang's courage in the battles he fought so valiantly. Yun Wuqiang always rushed to the front lines of the fight, and when he unleashed his dazzling sword energy, he would cut down the massive demonic beasts that seemed to cover the sky with a single blow. Undoubtedly, Yun Wuqiang was the hero and the last hope of the Central Plains. But in the present, after Sapigang's return to the past, Yun Wuqiang was just an arrogant young man from a noble and ancient family. Sapiang spoke to Yun Wuqiang in a challenging tone, noting that he had finally decided to intervene and face the situation. Here, Sapiang turned to Yun Wukong, addressing him as Little Yun, and sarcastically pointed out his delay in deciding to act. The two exchanged blows quickly, and Yun Wuqiang showed great skill in dodging Sap's attack. Sap smiled, commenting sarcastically that things were getting amusing. Yun Wuqiang responded, expressing his surprise at the sudden strength Sapong had acquired, even though he couldn't use internal energy until recently. Sapayang said this was indeed unexpected, enjoying Yun Wuqiang's reaction. While Gok Boy sat in pain and embarrassment from his loss, Yun Wuqiang pointed out that all Sapiang was doing with his newfound power was showing off in front of the disciples. Yun Wuqiang asked sharply if this new power Sapiang had obtained was related to those fateful encounters he talks about. Sapayang thought to himself that Yun Wuqiang was smart and perceptive, wondering if he was genuinely curious about this matter. Sapiang replied with a smile that if Yun Wuqiang followed his training diligently from now on, he might tell him this secret. But Yun Wuqiang coldly refused his offer. Yun Wuqiang said confidently that he didn't know what trick Sang used to change the class roster so quickly, but he would file a formal complaint with the academy. Yun Wuqiang added that he didn't care to learn from someone whose ego was inflated by a sudden stroke of luck. Then Yun Wukong turned and began to leave, and the rest of the students followed him, leaving Seg standing alone. Seg watched them walk away, and it seemed he had expected this behavior from them. Yun Wuqiang's followers continued to walk away towards the academic building, while Seg remained watching them from a distance. The students exchanged glances, and signs of tension and anxiety about what had happened appeared on their faces. In the end, Saigong smiled to himself with a calm and sarcastic smile, as if he were satisfied with how things were developing. Sapigang approached the student Tanli Jiang, placed a hand on his shoulder, and asked him with a sarcastic smile if he thought there was nothing he could learn from him. Sapiang continued speaking to Yun Wuqiang, saying that in just 10 days of his training, the student, Tanli Jiang, would be able to defeat you. Clear signs of shock and tension appeared on Tanli Jiang's face, who never expected his name to be used in such a challenge. Yun Wuqiang stopped suddenly, making a sound that reflected his great astonishment at what he had just heard. Yun Wuqiang turned sharply towards Sapayang, asking him clearly what he had just said. Not believing what he heard, Sapiagong smiled calmly and confidently and affirmed that he was willing to repeat his words as many times as necessary, pointing out that in just 1 week of training, Tanli Jiang would be able to defeat Yun Wuqiang easily. Then, Sapiang added that this student, whom Yun Wuqiang considered as weak as an insect, would become strong enough to defeat Yun Wuqiang. Tanli Jiang felt extremely shocked and turned towards the instructor, asking in confusion and panic what was happening. Before Tanli Jiang could finish his question, Sa Pegong forcefully placed his hand over Tanli Jiang's mouth to prevent him from speaking, which increased Tanli Jiang's anxiety. Yun Wuqiang's expression changed to anger and intensity, and signs of threat began to show on him, ready to confront Sapayang. Yun Wuqiang asked sharply if Sapiang was truly prepared to take responsibility for his words and his official challenge. Sapayang replied with complete confidence and a sarcastic smile that he was of course ready to take responsibility for what he had said. Sapayang proposed a bet to Yun Wuqiang on an official fight in 10 days between Yun Wuqiang and Tanli Jiang, and Tanli Jiang was confused and panicked by this proposal. He explained the terms of the bet, saying that if Tanli Jiang wins, Yoon Wookyong must follow his training without any objection. Sapiag continued that if Yoon Wookyong wins, he could do whatever he wanted. Whether it was asking him to leave the academy, apologizing, or kneeling and begging. However, Yoon Wookyong said with disdain that he didn't need anything from Sapyeong. In return, Yoon Wukong clarified that Sapigang should be prepared for the confrontation that would happen between them in a week. Tanny Jang and Sapyeong watched Yoon Wookyong as he left, and the signs of tension were clear on their faces. Suddenly, Tanny Jang began to scream unexpectedly from shock, which surprised Sapyeong, who did not expect this sudden reaction. Tanny Jang raised his hands in clear panic while Seg tried to calm him down, feeling surprised by his reaction. But he continued to scream hysterically, prompting Saigong to tell him that his voice was annoyingly loud. Tanly Jong grabbed Instructor Sa Pigong's clothes in a state of extreme panic, asking him what he had done and why he had put him in a confrontation with Yoon Wookyong. Sapyeong tried to calm Tanly Jang, asking him to let him go so he could explain why he chose this challenge, while Tan continued to scream that he had done nothing to deserve this. When Tanly Jong did not stop clinging to him, Sapong pushed him away forcefully, causing Tanny Jang to fall to the ground. Afterward, Sapong announced the cancellation of today's lesson and asked all the students to leave while Tanny Jang remained lying on the ground exhausted. He told the students that the schedule for the next lesson would be sent to them individually tomorrow. While the students left, wondering what was happening, Tanny Jang began to bemoan his fate as he cried, complaining about the predicament he had fallen into because of this challenge. Sapyeong simply advised him to win the confrontation, wondering why Tanny Jong was necessarily assuming he would lose. Tanly Jong regretfully explained that he had lost in his first official match after entering the academy against Gok Boy. He added sadly that he had lost humiliatingly in that fight, and ever since then Gok had been bullying him daily. Tanly Jong began to speak sorrowfully about his daily suffering due to the bullying from his classmate Gok Boy. But despite that, he wanted to reveal a surprising fact about him. Tanny Jong explained that even the monster Gok was unable to touch Yoon Wukong in a direct duel between them. He continued his speech stating that Gao was utterly defeated without being able to land even a single blow on Yoon Wookyong. Sapyeong listened to Tanny Jong's words and acknowledged that Yoon Wookyong indeed possessed an exceptional talent that could not be ignored. Tanny Jong added that Yoon Wookyong's talent in martial arts was very unique, even without the full support of the Yoon clan. Sapigang smiled with confidence and calm and told Tanny Jong not to worry about the confrontation. Then Sepe pointed to Tanly Jang with great confidence, assuring him that he was in fact stronger than Yoon Wookyong. Tanly Jang asked in extreme confusion what Sapyeong meant, as he did not comprehend his strange words. Sapyeong revealed a shocking truth, explaining that Tanny Jang in the future was himself the legendary archer who became famous for killing demons before time was turned back. In a moment of intense panic, Tanny Jang screamed loudly, refusing to accept what he was hearing. With clear emotion, Tanny Jang asserted that even if he accepted the idea of his instructor and his class suddenly changing, he didn't understand why he was chosen to publicly face Yoon Wookyong. Tanny Jang clearly expressed his annoyance and confusion, wondering why he specifically had to participate in a public duel against Yoon Wukong. Sapong asked him if he hadn't yet understood the purpose of all this, explaining that Tanly Jong's victory in the duel would be clear proof of his abilities as an instructor. Tanny Jong continued to complain and question what he personally would gain from all this, expressing his frustration at being dragged into this confrontation. Sapiag smiled mysteriously as he answered Tanly Jong's question, saying, "Revenge." Tanny Jang froze in shock and asked in extreme confusion what the instructor meant by the word revenge. Sapigang sarcastically asked him if he wasn't the one who was always being beaten by Gok Boy, which stunned Tanly Jong. Sapagong continued his speech asking how Tan felt when he recently defeated Gok Boy, clearly provoking him. Sapiag continued to provoke Tanly Jang, saying, "Did you feel excited or refreshed when you saw him defeated like that in front of you?" Then Sapyeong leaned his face close to Tanly Jang and asked him slightly, or did he feel angry because he couldn't get revenge himself? With a wicked smile, Sapyeong told Tanny Jong that if he became strong enough to defeat Yoon Wookyong, he would certainly be able to get revenge on Gok Boy himself. Sapyeong asserted that in that case, Even someone as weak as Tanijong would easily be able to achieve revenge with his own hands. Saepyeong approached Tanlijang and asked him enticingly if this wasn't a wonderful gift for him. Tanijang seemed a bit hesitant, wondering in confusion if it was possible for him to become as strong as his instructor said. Saepyeong replied with absolute confidence, assuring him that he certainly could. Finally, Tanlijang shouted with clear determination that he wanted to become stronger for himself only, not for revenge on Gokboy. A wide, suspicious smile appeared on Saigong's face as he declared with anticipation that he would make sure to see how possible that could be. Tanijong began his training immediately, and he appeared on the training ground facing a training dummy. In the final scene, Tanlijang continued to train under the supervision and observation of Saepyeong, in a clear indication of the beginning of his journey towards strength. Saepyeong sat watching Tanlijang train, suggesting that the time had come to assess his current skill level. Tanlijang stood ready, imagining himself facing Yoon Wookyong, and Saepyeong urged him to use all his strength and combat skills. Tanlijang took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves before beginning his serious training. Tanijang's training began and he moved quickly towards his target with great focus. Tanijang attacked the training dummy decisively and swiftly. Tanijang delivered successive and violent blows toward the training dummy. He continued to deliver strong and successive blows, showing his great determination to display his full capabilities. Tanijang unleashed successive blows with speed and power, his face looking serious and full of determination. Tanlijang's focus waned as he continued to train and his eyes showed great fatigue. Saepyeong shouted, encouraging Tanlijang to continue and not stop, asking him to exert all his strength. Tanlijang let out a powerful scream and intensified his blows, using all his internal energy. Suddenly, a strange glow appeared in Tanijang's eyes, indicating that he felt something unusual during the training. Tanijang suddenly stumbled and fell violently to the ground due to losing control of his internal energy. Tanijang looked very exhausted as he coughed severely and tried to catch his breath with difficulty. Saepyeong watched the situation silently and calmly, studying Tanijang's condition carefully. Then Saepyeong commented with just one word, pathetic, which shocked Tanijang greatly. Saepyeong directly asked Tanijang if he was aware of his current problem. Tanijang explained with difficulty that he feels his internal energy disperses in a strange way whenever he tries to perform basic movements. Tanlijang remembered that he initially thought he might have learned his clan's martial techniques incorrectly, but after training several times, he discovered he had no problems with the basic movements. Tanlijang also explained that he thought there might be a defect in his internal energy or his meridian points, and he had his condition checked repeatedly within his clan, but no defect was found. Tanijang eventually concluded that he might lack talent or suffer from an unknown illness, but Saepyeong smiled and told him that was not the reason. Saigong explained to Tanijang that the real reason is that his meridian points are more spread out than those of ordinary people. Tanlijang was surprised by what he heard and didn't fully grasp the meaning of Saepyeong's words. He wondered in confusion what Saep meant by that. So he explained to him again clearly that his meridian points are more widely spread than usual. Saep added that this rare condition is usually beneficial, but it becomes a problem because Tanijang is still young and lacks sufficient internal energy. He continued his explanation that all martial artists release their internal energy from the dantian to the meridian points. However, because Tanijang's meridian points are wider than usual and his internal energy is weak, this energy disperses and does not concentrate properly. Therefore, his internal energy does not concentrate correctly, and it continues to dissipate and scatter instead of focusing during combat. Tanijang felt great surprise because he had never heard of this before. Saepyeong smiled calmly and confirmed that what he said was completely logical, suggesting that he could help him overcome this problem. Saepyeong began to remember painful scenes from the past, where he saw himself among many scattered corpses on the battlefield in a moment full of pain and chaos. He found himself seriously injured, his clothes torn and stained with blood, and he could barely move from extreme fatigue and injuries. Then Tanlijang appeared in another guise wearing a cloak and hiding his face behind a mask indicating a significant change in his personality and appearance. Sapiang remembered how in the past he had obtained certain information by chance while standing in the midst of a field of destruction filled with monsters and corpses. The scene returned to the present where Tanli Jiang appeared kneeling before Sapiang on the training ground ready to receive advice and instructions. Tanli Jiang noticed the strange atmosphere around him and wondered to himself if Saigong had a hidden story or reason behind this strange atmosphere. Sapiang smiled calmly and mysteriously and said he would end his explanation here, keeping some matters to himself. Sapiang approached Tanli Jiang enthusiastically and said that now that they knew the nature of the problem, they had to work on solving it immediately. Tanli Jiang was surprised by the possibility of a solution to his problem and expressed his great astonishment at Sapiang's confidence. Sap affirmed with great confidence that the solution was indeed very simple and explained that Tanli Jiang could overcome his problem of spread-out meridian points by increasing the amount of internal energy he possessed. But Sapiang admitted that it is difficult to significantly increase internal energy in a very short time. Sapiang pointed out that for now he could teach Tanli Jiang only one way to overcome his problem. Sapiang instructed Tanli Jiang to focus on continuously gathering internal energy before starting his basic combat movements. Then Sapiang explained to Tanli Jiang that once he gathered enough energy, he could then effectively display his true strength. Tanli Jiang actually began to implement what Sapiang had said, and he dashed with great speed toward the training dummy charged with energy. With a powerful and amazing move, Tanli Jiang managed to deliver a very strong blow that shattered the training dummy and showed his true strength. An expression of joy and excitement appeared on Tanli Jiang's face after his success in correctly executing the attack. Sapiang stood watching this success, smiling with satisfaction and pride in his student. Tanli Jiang rushed towards Sapiang in a state of great joy, shouting enthusiastically, certain that his internal energy had not dispersed this time. Sapiang calmly reassured him that he had noticed his performance was good and told him not to worry because he had performed excellently before collapsing from exhaustion. Tanli Jiang felt a great sense of euphoria and declared with excitement that he had never felt such strength and vitality in his life. But in a sudden moment, Tanli Jiang suddenly lost his balance and began to fall, losing control of his body. Tanli Jiang was confused as he fell to the ground, and he felt that he didn't understand what had happened to him. Tanli Jiang began to cough severely and asked weakly what had suddenly afflicted him. While he was lying on the ground extremely exhausted, Sapiang coldly asked him about his condition. Tanli Jiang admitted that he felt no strength left in his body. Sapiang reassured him that this was just a minor side effect resulting from using his meridian points correctly for the first time. Sapiang added that his body had not yet adapted to using the meridian points in the new way, which is why this state of exhaustion occurred. He told him not to worry too much as these side effects would disappear automatically after a few months. Tanli Jiang was greatly surprised as he remembered that his duel with Yun Wuqiang would be in just 1 week, not after a few months as Sapiang had told him. The scene began with a calm view of the place where Tanli Jiang was training under Sapi's supervision at Dragon Spring Academy. Sapiang launched a fierce blow with his weapon towards Tanli Jiang, telling him that he has 2 major problems he must overcome. Tanli Jiang stood listening carefully to Instructor Sapiang, paying attention to what he would say about the problems he faces. Sapiang explained that the first problem is when Tan releases all the internal energy he gathers in a single blow, which causes his body to collapse right after the strike. Sapiang added that the second problem is that Tanli Jiang's energy core is still small and cannot store a large amount of energy for a long time, and that trying to do so could lead to energy deviation, which is forbidden. Sapiang asked Tanli Jiang if he had understood everything he had explained so far. Tan replied with confidence and affirmation that he understood well. As Tanli Jiang stood somewhat confused, Sapiang began to move his weapon in preparation for the next step, prompting Tan to wonder about the reason for this movement. Sapiang told Tan that he must think carefully about how to face Yun Wuqiang after the duel begins and asked him how much time he needs to gather his internal energy. Tanli Jiang replied hesitantly that he needs about 7 minutes to gather his energy. Sapiang asked in a firm tone how Tan intends to hold out against Yun Wuqiang for this long period. Tanli Jiang felt confused and anxious and asked Sapiang what he should do in this situation. Sapiang told him that the only solution is to avoid his opponent's attacks with all his might until he can gather his full energy. Sapiang surprised Tanli Jiang with a sudden attack, prompting Tan to scream in surprise while trying to avoid the blow. Tanny Jang asked in panic what Sapong was doing, as he felt he was being attacked for real. Sapiang shouted at Tan to focus, start gathering his energy, and never take his eyes off the opponent's weapon. Sapigang used an illusion technique, distracting Tanny Jang's focus. During the training, Tanny Jang was extremely surprised when Sapong broke through his defense with great speed and ease. He received a very powerful blow from Seg that knocked him to the ground, causing him to feel sharp pain. Tanny Jang fell painfully to the ground in the middle of the training field. Tanny Jang complained about the intensity of the pain, to which Saigong coldly replied that he was complaining even though he hadn't used any internal energy in the strike. Sapigang ordered him to stand up to continue the training, which made Tan wonder in surprise if this was really real training. He confidently assured him that it was evasion training, which prompted Tanny Jang to grumble about this strange training method. He approached Tanly Jang very seriously, assuring him that he wasn't just doing this to humiliate or annoy him. Sapigang added that he had clearly explained the reason for his weakness and had shown him a practical way to overcome this weakness. Then Sapiang seriously affirmed that this was the only way Tan could even slightly harm Yun Wukong in their upcoming duel in a week. Sapiang acknowledged the difficulty and harshness of this training, but asked Tanly Jang if this difficulty was greater than the humiliation and bullying he had endured from Gok Boy and Yun Wukong. Sapiang questioned if Tanly Jang was really willing to give up this precious opportunity to prove himself to everyone who had treated him with contempt. At this moment, Tanny Jang remembered Yun Wukong's face, as he felt determined to make his decision. He gripped his weapon tightly and apologized to Instructor Saigong for his previous hesitation. Tanly Jang stood firmly and told Sapiang that he was prepared to endure a full day of difficult training if he had to, and asked him to continue the evasion training. Tanny Jang was surprised by Saigong's words, who dismissed the idea that he would only train him for one day and instead assured him that he would train like this non-stop for the entire remaining week. Tan Lujang felt panic and disbelief when he heard he had to train continuously for the whole week, and he tried to back away, astonished by his instructor's excessive enthusiasm. Sapiang charged at him with great enthusiasm, shouting that he was coming for him in an extremely harsh training session. Tanny Jang raised his hands in terror, asking his instructor to wait and stop for a moment, but to no avail. Tanny Jang received a fierce blow and screamed from the intense pain on the training ground. After a full week had passed, the day of the decisive duel between Tanny Jang and Yun Wukong arrived. Large crowds of students and teachers at Dragon Spring Academy gathered around the dueling arena to watch the anticipated match. The students began to talk with great anticipation and excitement as they waited for the duel to begin. Yun Wukong appeared standing with complete confidence in the middle of the arena, holding his weapon and waiting calmly and steadily for the duel to start. On the other side, Tanly Jang stood with clear bruises on his face, looking tense and tired from the effects of the harsh training he had endured all week. The students began to whisper among themselves, wondering how long Tanly Jang would last in this duel, especially with his apparent injuries and fatigue. One student sarcastically said that Tanny Jang would be defeated with a single blow and would collapse to the ground immediately. Another student wondered if Tanny Jang had trained well and taken special measures for this duel, to which his classmate replied that he had seen him several times during his strange training. The student recalled scenes of Tanny Jang's harsh training, receiving continuous blows from his instructor with a stick for the entire past week, and Tanny Jang looked extremely tired from the amount of training and the injuries he had sustained. Gok Boy watched the scene sarcastically, describing Tanly Jang as foolish and naive for believing Saigong's words and putting himself in this difficult situation. Gok Boy continued his sarcasm and belittlement of Tanly Jang, considering that he had absolutely no chance of winning against Yun Wukong. Gok Boy directed his words to Tanly Jang in his mind, saying that he had fallen victim to the lies and deception of Instructor Sapigang and had dug his own grave. Yun Wukong spoke, addressing Instructor Sapiang formally before the duel began. Yun Wukong explained that although he had previously said he wanted nothing from Sapigang, he now wanted to set his own condition. Yun Wukong asked Sapiang to leave the academy himself if he lost, asserting that he did not want to waste his time in this way again. Sapiang immediately and with full confidence agreed to Yun Wukong's condition and swore on his name to abide by the condition, Sepiong reminded Yoon Wookyong of his own condition as well, which was that Yoon Wookyong must commit to attending all his training sessions without objection if he lost. Sepiong smiled slightly and warned Yoon Wookyong that the person he should be focusing on at this moment was not him, but Tanny Jang in the dueling arena. Tanny Jang stood firmly in the dueling arena, fully prepared to begin this fateful duel. Yoon Wookyong looked at Tanly Jang silently and with intense focus, also ready to fight. Sepeong clapped, officially announcing the start of the duel between the two students. Sepeong began to explain the rules of the duel, confirming that victory would be achieved if one of the parties lost consciousness, surrendered, or dropped their weapon. Sepiong also added that delivering fatal or life-threatening blows was strictly forbidden and that he was the final judge in this duel. The duel between Tanly Jang and Yoon Wookyong began amidst intense tension and anticipation from all those present.